Okay, so I thought it would maybe be interesting to make a slightly different style of video today. That we're going Dave McLeod style. It's one of my favorite people to watch in the world of climbing YouTube. But yeah, I thought today it would be maybe interesting to talk a little bit about managing frustration in climbing. Yeah, I think for a lot of people, dealing with frustration is a really important part of climbing and a super important mental aspect, because it's a lot easier to climb well if you're having fun. And when you're super frustrated, yeah, it starts to cloud your ability to climb, and it obviously just makes everything a way less pleasant experience. So we're gonna talk about dealing with frustration and some sort of tips for dealing with frustration, and also just where that comes from. I thought I'd make this video because my last few sessions out climbing have actually been quite frustrating. That's it for me. Fuck. What the fuck? I had the punt of my life off this boulder problem called Squoze. Like, some of the most shameful climbing I've ever done. And then my next few sessions on it, I was just not having good sessions. I was just climbing really bad on it. And then also had a session the other day where I just thought I would do this one boulder problem, maybe thought I'd do it easily, and then just had a really frustrating session where I didn't end up doing it. So yeah, I think that what I would call the most common root of frustration in climbing is personal expectations. So basically, anytime you come into a climb and you think, I'm just gonna do this easily, or I'm gonna be able to do all the moves on this, or I'm gonna be able to flash this, whatever it is, when you come in with really high personal expectations and then it doesn't go meeting your expectations, that is generally, I think, the most frustrating thing for people in climbing. I think the most common example of this is you try something at a much lower grade than your max level and you're not able to do it. A couple of reasons that this often happens. Probably the most important is just stylistic, right? For example, a lot of people are terrible at slab climbing, myself included. You get on a slab that's much easier than your sort of limit grade of what you're able to climb on an overhang, or vice versa, whatever it is, and it goes really poorly, and you get really frustrated, and then you're like, whatever, fuck this, I'm not gonna climb slabs ever again. I hate this, right? Obviously a hindrance to your progression, and also just makes for not a fun climbing session. That managing expectations is sort of the number one way to limit frustration in climbing. So obviously this is a bit easier said than done, but I think certain mantras can sort of be helpful. One is just remembering that the rock doesn't owe you anything. It doesn't care if you sent your project yesterday, if you're climbing super well, if you flashed the last 10 things you've gotten on, it doesn't owe you anything. That sort of can give you an avenue to think about your own personal progression, not just blame it on the certain climb. And yeah, just reminding yourself, like, anything can happen on this climb, and so I'm just gonna give it my best effort, and that's really what matters to me the most. Most frustration really does come at yourself, so this might not be super helpful, but it is one sort of helpful little mantra, I think. The other thing is just thinking about things as opportunities for improvement. So yeah, for example, yesterday, I think that what happened was I was really poor with my tactics. I didn't rest long enough, I didn't come into it with good enough skin. So that's an opportunity for me to remember, like, okay, even something that I thought would be easy for me, I still need to be a smart rock climber. I need to use good tactics. Or let's say you're getting shut down on a slab, you can think of it as like a good reminder to myself that to improve at climbing, I need to improve on slabs. One sort of last tip, I think, for sort of managing expectations is to try and avoid comparing yourself to others. So for example, let's say your buddy on-sighted this route, you usually climb a little harder than your friend in the gym, but so you go in and you're like, oh, I'm gonna on-sight this route, next thing you know, you're falling all over it. Obviously not helpful. A little bit of friendly competition is good, but I think that, yeah, if you can avoid comparing yourself to others and just think about your own climbing, that's pretty helpful for just keeping your expectations a little bit more realistic, a little more reasonable, and just, yeah, being a little more self-focused. Another tip that might be a little controversial for avoiding frustration, I think it's important to actually make excuses. No talk, dude. Bit of a hole in my fingertip. My feet went so numb that I just could not really climb. Second hole has a good bit of ice on it. I am too tired from a 5-hour session on Saturday. And maybe that's not quite the right way to put it, but I think it's important to be realistic about the circumstances that you're climbing on something under. So for example, let's say you're super tired coming into your session. It's going horribly, right? If you're not thinking about that and you're not recognizing that you're really tired, that's gonna lead to a really frustrating session. Or let's say your skin is terrible coming in and you're just sweating or you're bleeding, whatever it is, right? If you're not realistic about the circumstances and you think that every session should be perfect, that's gonna lead to frustration. You can look at someone like Alex Migos who says, no excuses, you just need to get stronger. Obviously, Alex Migos, beast of a climber, but I don't think that that's realistic for everyone. I think that for most people, yeah, having a little bit of excuse making can be good. And obviously there's another extreme, because if you're always making excuses, yes, that is gonna hinder you. If everything you try you have an excuse for, and it's, you're going there in perfect conditions and whatever, yeah, sometimes you're gonna be excusing yourself out of legitimate progression. But I think it's actually important to just sort of be a little more patient with yourself and recognize that it's not always just a personal failure or just a strength failure or technique failure. Like, yes, there are other factors at play. Some of them you can control, like your skin, and some of them you can't, like conditions. But regardless, it's just important to recognize those circumstances. One last tip for just dealing with frustration, just trying to remember that climbing is something that you do for fun. It gets hard when you attach your self-worth to climbing. It gets hard when you're trying to use climbing to get yourself out of some bad circumstances in your life, and you're feeling like you need to be climbing well to compensate for that. Yes, that's going to lead to a lot more frustration if you are not climbing well. Climbing is something we do for fun, and so if you're getting your ass kicked on the hard thing that you wanted to do, yeah, it can be helpful to go over and do something at a lower grade, or do something that suits you really well and do that instead of, trying to work on your anti-style, whatever it is. It's important to just try and reinforce that, I think, when things are going poorly and going frustrating. Just remind yourself what you do it for. Easy. Let's go. Sweet. I hope that some of these tips were just helpful for dealing with frustration in climbing and, making your sessions as fun as possible.